Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. My name is Michael Spinella, and I'll be your host for the next hour. This is episode 305 of the Canadiens Connection podcast, and I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host, who is the founder and the president of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. And how's it going today, Rick?
Hey, Michael. We're entering the third week, I guess, of July, and things are happening. You know, it was quiet. It was quiet for a bit, and then the Canadiens made a pretty big addition this past week. We're going to tell you about this. The other thing I just want to mention is talking about additions. We've been adding all kinds of new listeners, new Habs fans. Of course, a big thank you to our group of longtime listeners who have been pretty loyal with us for years and years and years. And welcome to all our new listeners to the Canadiens Connection podcast to let you know who we are and what you're going to hear. We're a long-form podcast. We're a weekly podcast. We come out every Saturday, and we've been coming out every Saturday since 2012. First as Habs 360 and now as the Canadiens Connection for the past 7 years. We're a group of credentialed journalists who get together, use our connections to share the information that we have, and we've got a pretty good group. Even we have an Emmy-nominated member of our group. So, listen, we do a weekly wrap. We talk about Montreal Canadiens prospects. We have a big topic every week where a lot of times we bring in some special guests and use our connections in the hockey community to share the information that they have with you. So, old hat for our longtime listeners, maybe just a bit of an introduction for the new group. And beyond that, Michael, you're going to tell them what we're going to talk about specifically today.
Yes, we're going to call this episode How the Montreal Canadiens Are Bolstering Player Development. And in this first segment, we will get you up to date on everything Montreal Canadiens, a little bit of roster news. We'll talk about prospects and some NHL news as well. Plus, we have some audio coming up a little bit later in the segment. And then in segment 2, get the singing angels ready. We're going to welcome back one of our very own, Patrick Williams, the AHL guru, who's going to come in and talk about a brand new hiring for the Laval Rocket. And in segment 3, it's a Have Your Say segment. Our Canadiens Connection question of the week is, should Pascal Vincent prioritize player development or focus on making a push to win the Calder Cup in Laval? We want to hear from you, and for those interested in chiming in and leaving us comments and questions along the way, what's the best way for them to reach out to us, Rick?
We've set up a special phone number for you. It's the Rocket Sports text line. You can reach us anytime, 24 hours a day, at 5853-ROCKET, 5853-ROCKET. That's 585-376-2538. Send us a text, leave us a voice message, and if you give your name and your location, we're likely to use it in a future broadcast.
Also, make sure that you are following us on social media. You can follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Plus, you can check out our website, canadiensconnection.fm. And to start, here's an interesting story that appeared this past week. A new yearly tradition for Paul Byron.
He took his family out to beautiful British Columbia. And who's there? Well, Shea Weber's there. Carey Price is there. But it looks like the Price family and the Byron family are going to get together on an annual basis and make this a bit of a yearly tradition. Spending a week together, and there was a lovely photo of the big group of them, the kids and the parents, hiking in Kelowna this past week. Paul Byron and Carey Price close when the two were on the ice. Now they're both transitioning to their after player careers in different ways, but still continuing that friendship.
So make sure you follow daily Habs posts throughout the offseason via Rocket Sports on Twitter, and check out exclusive content at InsideTheCanadiens.com. And a little bit of roster news here. There are reports of Vincent Lecavalier's role possibly changing here. Currently, he is a special advisor in hockey operations, and there's just a lot of different things being said right now for this to be nothing.
Yeah, it's coming from a bunch of different sources. So it sounds like something is percolating. We don't know what it is yet, but we're letting you know that we're going to be keeping an eye on this. We know that Vinny Lecavalier was brought on as a special advisor and working out of his home in Florida, but he's been getting involved, much more involved lately in decisions. He was very involved in the decision to bring in Pascal Vincent. He was part of the initial interview group with John Cedric and others who met with a group of candidates, possibly as many as 10 in Vegas, and then part of the second set of interviews as well. So is he officially going to be made as an assistant to Kent Hughes? There's maybe a vacant spot on the bench. Could he be an assistant to Marty St. Louis? It looks like something is going to happen where he more formalizes his role and perhaps moves to Montreal to make that happen. And we sounds like we have all kinds of emergency vehicles in the background to usher Vinny back to Quebec.
Of course. And with that, let's get to this week's Habs Prospect Report.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world. Bookmark thn.com/Montreal to follow our comprehensive coverage of Canadiens prospects.
Each week, we like to highlight a Montreal Canadiens prospect, and this week we're going to shine the spotlight on torpedo defenseman Bogdan Konushikov, drafted by the Montreal Canadiens in the 4th round of the 2023 NHL entry draft, 110 overall. Just last season, he was in the KHL with Torpedo, putting up 28 points through 65 games. And what do you have to say about Bogdan this week, Rick?
Well, 21 years old. He's continuing with Torpedo in the KHL. We remember that we reported some months ago that he extended his contract through the 2025-26 season. I just thought I saw something on his social media, and I thought this was a little bit different than you normally see on a hockey player's social media. He and his girlfriend, he posted, "Yesterday we went to the theater." And there's nothing surprising about it. I'm reading from his social media because I love the theater and I always go when possible. He went to the theater to see a production of Macbeth, and he says, "I give this play 10 out of 10. Incredible playing by the actors. The main character played the main role of Macbeth. I've always been impressed how actors can learn long monologues, then perform them on stage, but yesterday was somehow particularly good. For me, the theater is such a relaxation because I can dress nicely rather than a sporting gear and go to a beautiful performance. I can enrich myself culturally, broaden my horizons, communicate with people not on sports topics, which is also important." I think this is fascinating that he wants to be he wants to broaden his culture. He wants to not just be solely focused on hockey. And then he goes on to compare the structure of the theater to hockey. He talks about actors having their own troupe, like our teams. They rehearse, we train. They have plays, we have games. They play and people watch them too. And anyway, he goes on and he said, generally, I'd be interested to have a chat with some of the actors and find out what's going on inside them. Hopefully someday I can make that happen. This is just an intelligent guy who's a very good hockey player. One of the Canadiens' many defensive prospects. And I just thought it was interesting to bring a different side and to a more cultured, a more intellectual side, perhaps, to one of the Canadiens' prospects.
Yeah, sounds like a very classy gentleman, and if he likes the theater, he'll definitely love Montreal, so
Yes.
excited to get him over here at some point, and who knows, maybe we'll bump into him at a big production at some point.
There you go.
Other news in our prospect report here, Team Canada announced their roster for the 2024 World Juniors Summer Showcase, including Beckett Seneca, Caden Lindstrom, and TJ Ginla. The 2024 World Junior Summer Showcase is set to start on July 23rd and go through to August 3rd at USA Hockey Arena in Plymouth, Michigan.
So what Canadiens fans noticed here is Michael Hage is not on the list. And that doesn't mean that he won't be participating in the World Juniors in the end of December and January, but he would have to do something, I would say, pretty spectacular early in the year on his team to raise the awareness of the Hockey Canada folks. Why isn't he on the list? Well, there's a pretty good list of names there, some of which you read, part of that group of new draftees and from the previous year. And typically, Hockey Canada kind of has a bias against those players who are going to be playing for American colleges. And we know that Michael Hage is intending to go to the University of Michigan, the Wolverines, for this upcoming season. So, it's disappointing news. I'd say it's probably pretty disappointing for Michael Hage, but it's not. Let's not take it as negative that they couldn't use his help on the Team Canada roster for the World Juniors.
Yeah, so I know with the summer showcase, it's not the same as what we get towards the end of the year or the beginning of next year, December, January. I'm hoping he has an opportunity to make that team, but yeah, I think it is a little bit disappointing not to see him here playing with that quality of talent too. You know, I mentioned Beckett Seneca, Caden Lindstrom. Would have been pretty awesome to have him in that group of guys. No?
Oh, it would be a great experience for him playing. Best on best at that age group, the under 20s, playing with a group of best of Canada players. That would have been a wonderful experience for him. And like I say, it's not over, but he's just going to have a difficult time getting there.
Absolutely. A little bit of news for Ivan Demidov, Montreal's 5th overall pick this past draft. He is not at SKA St. Petersburg development camp, and it's a little bit of complicated, kind of interesting news coming out of SKA.
Yeah, it was his. We expected him to be there because we remember just after the draft. That he talked about when he was interviewed by the Montreal reporters. He said that there was he wasn't ready yet to get back on his ice. There was still a little bit of a problem with his ankle. We remember he had a knee issue and an ankle injury to end his MHL season. And he at the time he said a week or two maybe I'll go to the rink. Prior to being drafted, remember Dan Milstein, his agent, had a kind of a mini camp in a mini combine, let's call it, in Florida, as kind of an introduction. He didn't skate there, obviously, either, but we were expecting him to be back on the ice by now. When contacted, Dan Milstein said, no, he's not recovered yet from his injury. He's still suffering from his injury, so not ready to attend the development camp, which is maybe mildly concerning, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. The Athletic did a ranking of the top 20 drafted NHL goalie prospects, and I'll give you a quick top 5 here. They did this in tiers as well. So tier 1, coming in with the highest rank, is Jesper Wallstedt of the Minnesota Wild. Number 2, Yaroslav Askarov. And then you move on to tier 2, and number 3, we get a Montreal Canadiens prospect in Jacob Fowler. So very happy to see him ranked so high up here. Just behind him, Spencer Knight at number 4, and Devin Levi comes in at number 5. So that's pretty impressive from Jacob Fowler here, and being just one lower than Yaroslav Askarov. I'm pretty happy with that ranking overall.
Yeah, this coming from Scott Wheeler, and impressive, who's around Fowler in that tier 2 group. But on Scott's list, ahead of a Devin Levi, ahead of a Dustin Wolf, or even a Trey Augustine that was drafted the same time. So this is recognition of he had a spectacular freshman season last year. Yes, he played for a very good BC team, but he played almost every game. Had a very good team in front of him, but he stole some games as well. He's got some work to do. We've talked about it, that I think he's made big improvements in his conditioning and his general fitness level, but I think a little bit more work to do there. I think that Canadiens fans should be pretty excited seeing the group that he's with here as one of the top goaltending prospects out of the NHL.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we go through some of these lists, and we go through a lot of various lists on this podcast. You don't always get a Montreal Canadien ranked so high, so that's something that makes me excited. And also, within that top 5 that I mentioned, Jacob Fowler is the most recently drafted, so he's a little bit younger than some of those other
That's right.
goaltenders in that top 5 too, so there's only room to improve at this point.
Yeah, good point.
Some news coming from the Laval Rocket. Several players from the Rocket and Canadiens are training at the facility in Brossard this summer. The Laval Rocket's Twitter account has done a great job posting workout videos, on-ice videos, different photos. It looks like everyone's having a great time and putting in quite the workout.
Yeah, good to see them using the facility, training. Some of them remaining in Montreal over the summer. As you look through the videos, I spotted... there Sean Farrell was there, Luke Tuck, Lucas Condata, William Trudeau, Jaden Struble was in there. So it's good to see so many players taking advantage not only of the facilities, but the training staff. Dale LeBlanc's, the strength and conditioning coach, was in some of the photos. So taking advantage of the expertise of the personnel that are also there over the summer. So that's pretty exciting.
And the big news coming from the Laval Rocket this week, Pascal Vincent was named the head coach of the Laval Rocket. This is something I think was speculated on for a few weeks, certainly had a lot of media pumping his tires after he left the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. We'll take a deep dive into this in segment 2, and we do have some audio coming up in just a few minutes, but I'll get some thoughts on it from you about this one, Rick.
Well, this is interesting. The whole how this all played out is fascinating. Pascal Vincent is, let's say that the Canadiens went in the opposite direction when they were looking for their NHL coach. They got somebody with no experience. Pascal Vincent has a ton of experience, 30 years in the coaching ranks. He's 52 years old. He's had experience at all different levels, at the Q with Cape Breton and the Montreal Juniors. He's had NHL coaching experience at the assistant level in Winnipeg, and he worked very closely with Paul Maurice, who I think is one of the brightest coaches there is, and the opportunity to learn from him. He was given his own team with the Manitoba Moose, and 5 years he spent there, and worked in a development capacity and bringing along the Jets prospects, including one Jonathan Kovacevic that we're familiar with, and then was tapped to go to Columbus, and first as an assistant, and then really just thrown into the mix 4 days before the season went, Mike Babcock leaving, and as a head coach. And so he's had all kinds of different experiences. I think he's smart. He's calm. He's a good teacher. And I think he's going to bring some structure, first of all. He's going to bring some discipline. We know that the Laval Rocket haven't been the most disciplined team in the past, particularly under JF Houle. And they're going to be a team that's going to be physically fit and compete. I think that Pascal Vincent had difficult circumstances to deal with last season. But the one thing that I saw was that he seemed to get buy-in from his players. So here's a coach that has lots of experience. He's seen it all, but is willing to continue on and learn, and is anxious to get to work with the huge talent pool, the influx of talent from the Canadiens prospect pipeline.
Yeah, that's for sure. You talked about it a little bit there too. Last season with Columbus, it's hard to know how much to judge him based on what happened there. It was a pure chaos situation. Wasn't supposed to be the head coach initially, and when he did get appointed as a head coach, it seemed like a lot of people were really pumping his tires. What he did with the Manitoba Moose, certainly had a good track record there. So excited to bring in that experience, and of course, we'll keep talking about Pascal Vincent throughout the rest of this podcast too.
For sure.
You can find all our content about Canadiens prospects at our Rocket Sports YouTube account. Just go to InsideTheCanadiens.com. And now it's time to get to our quotes of the week. On Tuesday, Laval Rocket General Manager John Sedgwick announced Pascal Vincent was named as head coach of the Laval Rocket. And we have 3 different bits of audio. This was a pretty long press conference that went down this past week. And this first clip is Pascal Vincent talking about his vision of Habs brass.
The clarity of their vision and what they want to do. It was crystal clear what the job is, working with the prospects, working with the players in Laval, making sure that they develop properly. I just really liked their vision, and Jeff was there, Kent was there, John was there, Vinny Lecavalier was there, Alex Burrows was there. It was Mr. Crawford was there as well. So it was really well done, and I felt okay. Those guys have a plan, and they know they have a vision, and they know how to achieve what they want to achieve, or they know the steps that are needed to be taken. So that really impressed me, and that was a big reason why other than coming back home, when I talked earlier in French about the vision of the team and where they want to go, they really know what they're talking about, and I really like the vision. So it's that's the one piece that really excited me when I spoke to them.
You mentioned our Canadiens connection question of the week about whether the fans would like a Calder Cup championship, they want a playoff-bound Laval Rocket team, or they want Pascal Vincent focusing on player development with the prospects. One of the things, and we just heard him there talking about the vision of the Habs brass. And he mentioned who was in the room: Jeff Gorton, Kent Hughes, Vinny LeCavalier, Eric Crawford, and Alex Burrows, and said that they were all unified in their vision and the clarity of the vision. He said it was crystal clear to him what the focus was going to be. And that's really important for an AHL coach, so that he knows how he's going to be measured, what's going to be expected of him, so that he can now become part of that vision. And it reminded me that in one of the very first press conferences that Kent Hughes had just once he was appointed, he said that he sat down with Jeff Gorton, and that they talked about breaking one of the issues that Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes saw within the Montreal Canadiens organization is that there were silos. And what they meant by that is that everybody was operating, in their own little domain, their own little fiefdom. This is my kingdom, and I'm going to run it the way I run it, kind of thing. And so everybody, was going off in a direction. Some of those directions might be compatible. Some of them might not be. They might be, contradictory. It sounds like, and we heard that all of the important people who are setting the vision for the organization were there, and they communicated directly to their AHL head coach about what their vision was. And now everybody can be on the same page. And I think that, maybe that wasn't the case, that JF Houle and there's a place for coaches who are interested in winning with veterans. I think JF Houle was that kind of coach, that he prioritized his veterans and wanted to win with them. But that might have worked with a different organization, but with what the Canadiens are doing, drafting, having all of this young talent in the pipeline, they need somebody who's on the same page with them. And to me, it sounds like they have their guy.
Yeah, that's for sure. This next bit of audio comes from Pascal Vincent, and he's talking about the NHL and AHL being different.
But it's the NHL. And in the NHL, you have to win hockey games. The American League is different. It's keeping an eye on tomorrow while we develop today. And how can we bring our players to a place where they can perform at the NHL level?
Keeping an eye on tomorrow while we develop today. I thought that was a brilliant quote, and the recognition that they're different places. In the NHL, it's all about winning. That's the only measuring stick in the NHL. AHL, a little bit different. It's nice to have a winning environment, but you have to take a long-term goal as meeting development goals, more so than watching where you are in the standings and wanting to change that.
That's exactly what I like to hear. So that's a very correct answer in my opinion. The final bit of audio, he's talking about what the goal is.
The goal is to win the Stanley Cup. That's the ultimate goal, and we want to win the Stanley Cup in Montreal. If we win the Calder Cup in Laval in the meantime, great. That's a bonus, and we're going to be thinking about it. We're going to be talking about it. We want to create a winning environment in Laval. But the ultimate goal is winning the Stanley Cup, and how we're going to help our players if they're being called up, when they're being called up, how are we going to prepare them properly so they can help the Montreal Canadiens.
And I'm going to deal with this personally because I've honestly felt like I've been stuck out on an island for a dozen years. I've been saying this. What is the goal of the AHL coach? To win the Stanley Cup. And people would look at me like I had three heads. Like, what are you talking about? He's the coach of the AHL team. Yes, but he should be focused on the organization winning the Stanley Cup, because he's got a really big part to play in that, because he's preparing those prospects and those future players. And in fact, I don't care who you are in anywhere in the Montreal Canadiens organization, if you're asked, what's your goal? The same answer, winning the Stanley Cup. And he said, hey, if we happen to get a Calder Cup along the way, great. But our ultimate goal is winning the Stanley Cup. So I need to make sure that we're best preparing our players for that challenge. Brilliant answer. I love this, and I was like, finally, someone agrees with me.
Yeah, this is really refreshing to hear. I almost want to put some of these quotes, back to back with what we've heard from JF Wool over the past 2 years. And yeah, no, I like everything I've heard from Pascal Vincent throughout those 3 different quotes there. So happy to bring that forth. And of course, keep these in mind when you answer our Canadiens Connection question of the week. With that, I think we'll end the segment with a few bits of hockey news from around the league. To start here, the Carolina Hurricanes have placed Evgeny Kuznetsov on unconditional waivers on Wednesday for the purposes of a mutual contract termination. So reports emerged earlier this week that Kuznetsov was planning to mutually terminate his contract and go back home to play in Russia, play for SKA St. Petersburg in the KHL, which I believe that's
we
the team
heard that
that
name.
Ivan Demidov. Yeah. Nice little connection there.
This very difficult. We know there was a trade during the year. We know that that he was part of the NHL NHLPA player assistance program. I think this is probably a good move. He's going home. And will play in the KHL. He's leaving a lot of money on the table in doing so, but it sounds like this is best for the organization and the player. Indeed.
Yeah, that's correct. And last bit of news here, we've been following some JFresh rankings over the past couple weeks. We did defensemen, we've done goaltenders. How about we do some forwards? And this is a fan vote for the 2024-25 season. Top 64 forwards. And I'll give you a quick top 5. 1, Connor McDavid. 2, Nathan McKinnon. 3, Austin Matthews. 4, Nikita Kucherov. 5, Leon Draisaitl. I think that's a pretty accurate top 5. I might move that around a little bit, but hard to argue it too much. And within that top 64, there is one Montreal Canadian coming in at number 43, and that is Nick Suzuki, just 1 in front of Mark Scheifele, 1 back of Carter Verhaeghe. So a little bit of a lack of star power on Montreal in terms of forwards here. There was a top 80 released just a little bit later on, and with that, you did have Cole Caulfield squeaking onto the list, ranked number 74. So moving back a little bit. And to be honest, Cole Caulfield did have a little bit of an inconsistent season, was not scoring at the same rate that he was previously, so he falls out of favor just a little bit, but he's still within that top 80. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Rick.
Yeah, this is fascinating, and maybe there are Canadiens fans out there that would quibble with the ranking of Nick Suzuki, should be higher or I guess it's about right, and I think there's potential for Nick to climb that list. But the Canadiens need some more star power, and in the forward ranks, and I think that's fair. And they focused on that at this most recent draft. Just out of that top 64, there are a couple of Canadians. Cole Caulfield's ranking fell a little bit. And at number 92, you have Juraj Slafkovsky, and of course, he made a big jump. Wasn't ranked before that. So this is interesting. And as you go through, you'll see the players that made a big jump. A player like Wyatt Johnson, a huge jump. A player like Jonathan Huberdeau, a huge fall. And all of that kind of makes some sense. Canadians related. Sean Monahan went from number 205 to 124, going the other direction. You had Jesperi Kotkaniemi 152 to 215, and if we think of what could have been, Pierre-Luc Dubois went from 61 to 153. So all of these lists are fun, and there's opportunity as the Canadiens rebuild goes on to add a few more members to that top 64 list.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I will reiterate, this is based off of a fan vote, so it's not like there's expert opinions or necessarily a whole lot of math involved in this. But nonetheless, I do like listening to what fans of other teams have to say about certain players. So I think it gives you kind of a ballpark as to what the feeling is around the Montreal Canadiens forwards. I think that's about correct.
Yeah, and I think if you're mad about the numbers, get out there and vote.
Yep, that's exactly it. So coming up, we'll hear a brand new message from our sponsors, DraftKings, and then we will get to our big topic segment, Boosting Hockey Development with Patrick Williams. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Know the beautiful thing about being a sports fan? There's only like 2 days the whole year without a game. 2! With so much happening and so much action, that makes just about every day game day at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. It really couldn't be any easier or any simpler. I know for me, during the summer months, my bets are getting placed on Formula One races. And if you are new to DraftKings, you've got to check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Deposit and eligibility restrictions apply. See terms and responsible gaming resources at dkng.co/base.
Welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. My name is Michael Spinella, and you can find me on Twitter at the Spinella. With me in the studio is our president and founder of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. You can find him on Twitter at Rocket Sports. You can also follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and check out our website, CanadiensConnection.fm. And just a reminder here to subscribe to the Canadiens Connection podcast in the player or on your favorite podcasting app. That way you don't miss a single episode. And Rick, we're very excited to welcome in both Amy Johnson and Patrick Williams in just a few moments. But to set the tone here, prospect development got a huge boost this week as the Montreal Canadiens hired Pascal Vincent as the head coach of their AHL affiliate. Vincent brings 30 years of coaching experience at the QMJHL, AHL, and NHL levels. Laval Rocket general manager John Sedgwick described Vincent this way: his strong values, collaborative mindset, and tireless work ethic make him a great fit for the organization and the ideal person to work with our talented group of young players.
Patrick Williams has got a rather unique perspective. First, we know him as the AHL guru and part of the Rocket Sports team, and has certainly covered Pascal Vincent when he was with the Manitoba Moose and knows him and interviewed him. But prior to that, Patrick Williams was a reporter for the Winnipeg Jets and so knows Pascal Vincent from his time there. So we couldn't have found a better guest to tell our listeners all about who this person is, Pascal Vincent.
And I'll send it over to you, Amy.
Well, it's always a good day on the Canadiens Connection when Patrick Williams is back in the studio with us, because who else could we really turn to for all of the information that we need about anything related to the AHL? And boy, is there a big one today. And of course, we had to do, now that, the Calder Cup final has settled down a little bit, we had to do a summer check-in with Mr. Patrick Williams. So how are you today? Welcome back to the show.
Good. Yeah, it has finally settled down. Yeah, it's weird how it's going, full speed, and then it's right after I'd say the July 4th holiday, it just abruptly stops, right?
Yeah.
And the entire free agent market now is pretty much at a standstill. So by the way, if you're the Laval Rocket or anybody else, there's plenty of good talent out there.
Chris Terry's out there.
Terry's out there. Yeah, multiple, former leading scorers, league leading scorers. I mean, you look at Rocco Grimaldi's 36 goals last year, second in the league. You got first team All-Stars. I feel like I'm a
used car salesman. Yeah.
Everything must go. So
former Laval player Adam Cracknell. There's some pretty good vets out there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Casimir Kaskasuo.
Oh yeah.
Most recently with the Laval Rocket.
Yeah.
So, it's gotten very slow very quickly.
YouTube star Casimir Kaskasuo.
Yes. So we're now kind of, I think, in that quiet stage of the summer, right? Where, schedules are out, the development camps are done, everything, we've checked off all those different lists. So here we are.
But the Canadiens and the Laval Rocket made big news this past week by announcing the head coach of the Laval Rocket. And it's not only news for Laval Rocket fans, although it certainly is for them, but it is news as well for Montreal Canadiens fans because of the development aspect of the AHL head coach, and especially with prospects who could find themselves in Laval this season, whether it be Lane Hudson or David Reinbacher, Logan Mailloux, Adam Engstrom, Sean Farrell, Philippe Machar, Heinemann, Beck, Kidney. There's going to be plenty, and eventually Demidov on his way. So those prospects need a brand new coach, and with JF Uhl heading off to Clarkson University, the Canadiens scheduled some interviews while they were in Vegas with John Cedric and Vinny LeCavalier and Eric Crawford's handling those interviews. Second interviews happened back in Montreal, and it was Pascal Vincent. So we're here today to talk about Pascal Vincent, a head coach that you know very well, and we'll talk about his experience, especially with the Manitoba Moose. But first, most recently, he was the head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and that lasted for just one season. So, Patrick, what's with the short leash in Columbus? Is it a fault with Pascal Vincent? Is it simply a matter of a bit of a mess in Columbus, or a new GM coming in and Don Waddell wanting his own guy behind the bench?
Wrong place at the wrong time. I would go with, you look at so just a little background on him, Vincent. He got into the coaching business at 23 years old, right? He played junior in the Q, played once a year overseas, and got into that coaching game early. 30 years this fall actually, and then so he he'd kind of been one of the very loyal type soldier, an assistant, in different stops, and associate coach, and he's certainly run his own show at the junior and the AHL levels, and he finally gets an opportunity, and it's 4 days before training camp. It's coming off the Mike Babcock situation in Columbus. It's with a team where, they weren't great to start with. And it's with a general manager where, he's fighting for his job. And so, Vincent comes in there, and obviously the mandate there is to win, but you probably don't have the horses to really do so. And then your GM gets bounced midway through the season. You don't make the playoffs. Then you're kind of left dangling there for a while they try to find a new GM. Don Waddell becomes available from Carolina. He shows up. He obviously wants kind of a fresh start. He wants his own people in there, and you're there in June, and you get booted, right? And that's just a real tough situation, right? But someone's that's certainly well respected. I covered him when he was with the Jets, and very patient, very clear in his expectations with players. If you're looking for a guy with a lot of emotion, a lot of demonstrativeness, he's not your guy. But I think somebody who maybe, in a market like Montreal and by extension Laval, that's a good thing, right? Like, you have more than enough energy from the media. You don't need somebody that kind of plays into that. So, very good development record in Manitoba. Somebody that's really worked well with young players, very good teacher. And, like I said, like the first thing that really came across to me, when I first started covering him, and then certainly with his work with the Moose, is just he's very intelligent, right? Like, this is a guy that he's not just intelligent by hockey standards. Like, he's a guy that he'd be doing something if he wasn't in hockey, right? Like, he's, very, very methodical in how he works. And he did a really good job there. He was coach of the year back in 2017-18. Never had necessarily the best rosters in terms of, a lot of vets and, teams that were loaded, but, very well-structured teams, very, competitive teams. They played hard. And so I think, this is a critical time, as you mentioned, with that influx, of just one prospect after another coming into the system, at the pro level, that, or a year in maybe, that you need a very good teacher there to help them make that leap to the NHL, because you can't afford to have those picks come in and then have them get botched at this level. And this is where an investment in a really high quality coach at the AHL level, I think, is a really smart move for Laval.
So you mentioned you need a good teacher, and he was a teacher, spent 5 years with the Manitoba Moose, a good teacher with players like Jets prospects like Kyle Connor and Dylan Sandberg, Cole Perfetti, Logan Stanley, Jack Roslovic, and one Jonathan Kovacevic that Canadiens fans will be familiar with. But prior to being with the Moose, I would say that Pascal Vincent had a good teacher in the time that he spent with Paul Maurice.
Yes, that was his first move into the pro ranks. He'd always been a junior level. One thing I think you notice about Pascal Vincent is he's not one of those coaches that hops jobs a lot, right? Like, he stays in one place for a while. He was with the Jets for 5 seasons, and like you said, with the Moose for 5. Then he was with Columbus for another 3. He was in Cape Breton for, I believe, 12 years. So he's a guy that's, he's not somebody that's always kind of looking for that next job, right? I think that's a really good quality in a coach, especially at this level. That can be tough, where you always talk about, you don't want your players at this level to overlook this level and be that wanting to be in the NHL, yesterday. We don't want your coach that way either, right? Like,
Yeah.
kind of, he sets the tone, and so you have a guy like Vincent who worked with someone like Maurice. I mean, there's a guy with almost 30 years of NHL head coaching experience, and Vincent's, he's one of those kind of people that's he's much more of the eyes open, ears open than the mouth open, right? Like, he's somebody that kind of just takes things in around him, and he really, he came a long way, and he was, I think with him in Montreal or in Winnipeg, he was always entrusted with more and more responsibility as things moved along. So like, he moved from, when he came there, Claude Noel was running the show. Then Maurice came in, there and they got to work really close together. And then they worked together at a different level when Vincent went to the Moose. And so that's a different type of relationship.
That's right.
So, that's
recommending call-ups and those kinds of things.
Recommending call-ups, executing a plan. He spoke about that several times in his press conference the other day, about his job in Laval won't be to sit there and hash out a plan. His job is to take that plan that is developed at the NHL level and then come down in Laval and execute it. And, that's not always easy. At this level, some, coaches sometimes have their own agenda in terms of what they want to do and how they want to play. And that can be definitely a source of tension at times. And so I think having someone like Pascal Vincent that really understands that's certainly demonstrated he can do so. I think is a really good. It bodes really well, I think, for the relationship. He mentioned Martin St. Louis. They didn't really know each other that well. So, they've been in the, getting to know you stage, and, as that relationship builds more and more, they'll get more and more on the same page. And I think you'll see a good fit there. I think, you need someone like Vincent there to really understand his role and accept it, and then come in to the AHL club and carry out that plan.
Now, an NHL coach or a coach who has NHL experience moving back to the AHL level, it's not common, but it's also not unheard of. And we saw in the Calder Cup final maybe an example of that.
Yeah, Dan Boswell, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that reflects well on a coach when he's willing. So with Biosma, for example, he recognized that, for him, he was losing a little bit of his passion for what he was doing. So he kind of needed to recharge. So, that's a case where, like Biosma, he really kind of put his ego in check in terms of, here he was a former Jack Adams winner, Stanley Cup winning coach, head coach, coached in the Olympics. Not only did he go back to the AHL, he went back as an assistant coach. So that was really impressive, how Biosma did that. And then he, eventually took over with Coachella, and kind of reworked his reputation, reworked his coaching strategy and his approach. And, I think with Vincent, this offers him a chance too, I think, to demonstrate that, that year in Columbus was not a reflection of what he can do.
Yeah.
And that's, I think people that, that have followed him understand that, you're certainly not going to, the Columbus Blue Jackets have had problems for a lot longer than Pascal Vincent. Right? This is a team that going back to, 2000 when they began play really has never quite figured it out. They've had the little bursts here and there of success, but largely it's been kind of a revolving door of coaches, and it's never all come together, and just that's just the way it is in hockey sometimes. But so that I don't think you can pin that. And I think to his credit, he certainly acknowledged that there are things he'd like to do better, that he wish he had done better in Columbus, and that he's learned from mistakes he made, and I think that reflects well on him, like that he is willing to kind of take stock of what he can do better and how he can become a better coach from it, and but he also did dwell on that either. So I think he's an introspective kind of person.
And I think that fans, I've seen a little bit of criticism from Canadiens fans about his treatment of the younger players in Columbus. Have to realize the situation. Folks said as far as the blue chip prospects, Adam Fantilli and David Juracek and maybe Kent Johnson didn't get as much ice time. But as you said before, that's probably because of the circumstances, not because he made a mistake with the prospects necessarily.
Yeah, no, and I've seen quite a bit of Juracek in Cleveland for the past 2 years, and yeah, I mean, I think he's eventually going to become a heck of a player at the NHL level. But there are nights even in the AHL where there are definitely gaps in his game still, and you can sometimes get away with that at the AHL level. The NHL level, obviously, far less easy to get away with that. And so, I think I can't ever fault a coach that wants to take a patient approach with the player and not hand everything to them right away. Because that's a very good way to ruin a player, right? Like you put them in situations where that they're just not ready for on a consistent basis, then it can go sideways, and you can develop a lot of bad habits. You can develop a lot of confidence issues if you push a player too much too soon. So I don't personally have any problem with how he handled Juracek. I think it's something that you see a lot of the top NHL clubs do with young prospects, and let's be honest, I think if Columbus hadn't been what they are, you could make an argument that with the top NHL team, Juracek wouldn't even been with the NHL club. He would have been in the AHL. So I think I don't put that on Vincent at all. I think Vincent has shown that he's a good teacher, and I'm certainly not going to fault him with a 20-year-old 6th overall pick who understandably wants to be in the NHL, but sometimes the coach has to be the bearer of bad news, and if you're not ready, you're not ready. And like I said, like Juracek, obviously, I think people get dazzled by the very obvious skill and talent, but you don't have to watch him for too long to definitely pick up some gaps in his game that still needs some work, and understandably so. He's 20 years old. I mean, how many players are a finished product at 20? So I understand the criticism of Vincent for that, but I think there's a lot of context around that that's important to understand as well.
Now, another kind of unique aspect to Vincent's hiring is that this is not a case where Pascal Vincent is hired as the head coach and now he gets to assemble his assistant coaching staff. It's kind of gone the backwards way, right? Where you've had Martin Laperriere and Marco Marciano have been extended just this summer, right after JF Wool was, or at the same time. They've received their next 3-year contract extensions. Kelly Buchberger had already left the organization, but his position has been recently filled with Daniel Jacob. So all of the assistant coaching positions have either very recently this summer either been re-upped or are new contracts that have been signed. And then the head coach comes in and he's already got a team assembled. Now he worked with Martin Laperriere back in AAA. Marco Marciano, he actually had hired Marco when he was working as a GM and head coach in the QMJHL. So there is some working relationships there, but can you describe a bit how unique this situation is and whether or not what the challenges of kind of meshing a new group like that together, where the head coach is kind of already given their assistant coaches.
Yeah, it is. Like you mentioned, fortunately, there is some pre-existing history there to a little bit of an extent. But it really can kind of depend, I think, from team to team, coach to coach, how much latitude they get in putting together a staff. Sometimes you walk in and you just inherit what's there. I mean, it's especially if you're a first-time head coach at this level and you have to make it work, and maybe it does and maybe it doesn't. I will say, like, I think for Vincent, he's a guy that I think meshes pretty well with most coaches. I don't think there should be any issue there. Especially with them having some prior history. But yeah, no, it definitely that's a challenge. I mean, it's like any relationship anywhere, right? Like there's a lot of hours together, right? It's a lot of hours watching video, a lot of hours going over, planning, a lot of hours on the bus, a lot of hours behind the bench. And if you can't find a kind of a common ground there, like you don't have to be best friends or best, buddies, but you better at least be able to tolerate each other. So yeah, it can definitely. I have seen cases where that's a challenge. I don't think that should be a problem though for Vincent though, and that staff they're professionals, and I think if to whatever extent that they need to get more familiar with each other, I think they will, and they'll move on and everything. Because the job here is too important, right? Like, if you can be you can draft as well as you want. You can do everything right. But if your AHL staff messes up, all that work can go down the drain, right? And I've seen that countless times where you put some really good prospects into a system and they just don't have the right coaching at the AHL level, and those players either stagnate, they are completely a bust, or they never quite meet their potential. And that's where teams, NHL clubs, get into that kind of that no man's land, where you're drafting well, you're putting players in the system, but they're not actually turned into NHL players. This is I use the analogy all the time, and but it's true, right? Like the draft and all that is going to the store and buying the proper ingredients. The AHL is when you get home and you're in the kitchen and you actually have to figure out, how do I turn this into actually, an edible meal? It's a whole nother story altogether. Right. And it's a different skill set. And it's vitally important. I think it's something that's overlooked, incredibly so. I mean, but if, you see the successful NHL clubs more often than not, almost to a man, have really good development programs. And, likewise, the teams that struggle, they don't. And, that's where the investment really shows. And I think that's why getting someone like Vincent to come in here, guy that, has worked at all levels. He's seen the business from every level, junior right up to the NHL. He's been assistant coach, a head coach, an associate coach. Like, he understands all the different roles and responsibilities. I think that's where this hiring can really pay off.
Well, I like that you brought that up, because we know we've talked about it quite often here on the show with you on Canadiens Connection. You and I have talked about it plenty on our YouTube channel on Rocket Hockey Report about concerns, not just this past season, not even this past coaching regime, but even prior coaching regimes, of how, maybe there wasn't a committed focus to development by the coaching staff at the AHL level within the Montreal Canadiens organization. And so every time there's a coaching change there, it's kind of like we hold our breaths and say, is this going to be the coach that actually focuses on development? And I want to read you a quote that Vincent had at his media availability this week, that for the first time leaves me really optimistic. It's a weird feeling. I don't know what to do with it. It's I really just don't know. But and I will give a stick tap to our colleague Chris G, who had put out some quotes about Vincent's press conference, and this is the one that caught my eye, where he's commented on his time with the Blue Jackets, but pivoted to something that I thought was absolutely just, yes, that's exactly what I've wanted to hear from a Laval head coach. And he says, quote, "I learned a ton last season. It was a season where I've learned a lot, but the organization was at a different place. It's the NHL. In the NHL, you have to win hockey games. The American League is different. It's keeping an eye on tomorrow while we develop today." And I just about cheered out loud when I heard that. Am I right to be cautiously, guardedly optimistic? Does that sound like, has Montreal finally found the coach that is going to, it's not necessarily at the sake of winning, but is the development priority really going to take a spotlight in Laval now?
Short answer, yes. Longer answer is I saw him do that in Manitoba. Did it quite well. And I think the fact that, like you said, he kind of pivoted to that answer. Like it wasn't one of those answers that were kind of, or, things floated out there, right? Like this was something that he was, that he went that direction. So I think that bodes really well. I think he's very clear on what the mandate is. And I think that's a big reason why they brought him in, right? Like they, Ken Hughes, Jeff Gordon, the entire staff in Montreal, they understand. They can't get this wrong. Like, your AHL head coach is, quite frankly, one of the most important hires you can make. Really across your entire operation. And if you don't get it right, a lot of other things go wrong. So I think you're right to be optimistic. You probably can even drop the cautiously part. I think they got the right guy. That's definitely, he can teach, he can get those prospects to the Montreal Canadiens. And, he's somebody that, like he's very soft spoken, right? Like, you sit down with him and, you feel like you're kind of, maybe speaking with an accountant or like he's not a yeller. He's not a screamer. He's not a showman. But he definitely has very, very high standards. And, he's certainly not afraid to really come down on a player if he has to, but it's not going to be the loud, dramatic, proclamations. It's going to be, a lot of that's just very clear understanding of what a player has to do. And, I think he certainly has a lot of credibility with young players too. 30 years in the business, all different levels, including the NHL. I think if you're a young player, if you go eyes open, ears open, there's a lot you can learn from someone like Vincent.
You just said the AHL coaching hire is one of the most important in the organization, and I agree 100%. It's having a development minded coach it's a difficult thing to bring into your organization. It's a difficult beast to find. And as an overall organization, you have to have a focus, a really pure focus on winning the Stanley Cup. And I thought it was really refreshing this week. Amy mentioned the press conference and the quotes that Chris transcribed. The one that really caught my attention was Vincent was asked about his goals as the new head coach, and he said, the goal is to win the Stanley Cup. That's the ultimate goal. We want to win the Stanley Cup in Montreal. If we win the Calder Cup in Laval, in the meantime, great, that's a bonus. But he went on to say that we're going to prepare our players properly so that they can help the Montreal Canadiens. And listen, I've been saying exactly those words for 15 years, and I felt like I've been out on an island because when you talk to most AHL coaches, some of them talk about teaching and whatnot. Jeff Wu was always talking about finding the right veterans to help win for the good fans in Laval. But this idea about the AHL coach being such a key component of the Canadiens organization, that his job is also like, and I've always felt, if you ask anyone in the organization, what's your goal, the answer should be the same: to win the Stanley Cup. Pascal Vincent, the only one I've heard. Can you talk about that and talk about why that there's some tension with that, with different teams and different organizations, and how that isn't always the case?
Well, for one, development's a long-term goal. Wins are short-term, right? So you get that kind of that immediate gratification if you're a coach and you're winning, that you don't necessarily get from developing, because the work you put into development doesn't necessarily show up, in terms of the finished product, and until 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And you don't. It requires you to kind of be a selfless person. That you're going to do a lot of work. You're going to do work behind the scenes. You're going to do the unglamorous work, and then you're going to hand that player off, and that player's going to, if all goes well, will have success for another head coach at the NHL level. And I think it does take a certain personality to be willing to kind of put their ego to the side, to put their, maybe in some ways, their own career objectives to the side. And that's not always easy to find. And it's one thing, you will sometimes hear coaches, certainly, in the quieter moments or in the off season, they'll say that they get that. But once they get into game mode and they're trying to win games and they're trying to make the playoffs, sometimes that goes out the window. And I think that sometimes it also comes down to they're given maybe conflicting, it's the word I'm thinking of. They're given conflicting goals by management, right? In the quieter times, they're told, we want you to develop. And then yet I've seen coaches where they develop and then they get fired at this level because they didn't win enough games, didn't make the playoffs. And they kind of throw their hands up. They're like, okay, what do you want me to do here? I did what you asked me to do. I did it well. And you ended up measuring me on a completely different benchmark. So that can be frustrating for a lot of head coaches. I've spoken with them through the years that, they feel like, kind of like, what's going on here, right? So that's the first part. The second part is,
and just before we move on to that, I would say you're absolutely right, and I think this is a key point, that oftentimes there is a conflicting mission, direction given to the AHL coach. What was really important in the press conference, because if Pascal Vincent is saying these things and he's just coming out of multiple sets of interviews with John Sedgwick, the GM, and at this point Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, all this has got to be the message from the organization. And Vincent said, quote, the clarity of their vision, and he's talking about Jeff Gordon, Kent Hughes, John Sedgwick, the clarity of their vision and what they want to do was crystal clear what the job is. Working with prospects, working with the players in Laval, and making sure that they develop properly, so that, you want to go in, when you go into an interview, you want to ask, what's a win look like? What, if I'm successful, what does that look like? It sounds like he asked that question and he was told, developing the prospects. So it, at least at this stage, sounds like everybody's on the same page. Sorry to interrupt before you went, but I didn't want to lose that point, because I think that was really clear, really key what you said, that the mission has to be one.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think you know, a lot of AHL coaches, if they heard that, would probably like you know, pump their fist in the air, like, you know, thank you,
Yeah.
finally, you know,
Yeah.
somebody you know, speaking up on our behalf, because you know that is something that they feel that, you know, they're doing what they're told to do, and then and I think that the clarity of the mission is a really key point where um, there's one thing I noticed is that they seem to have a lot of people in on the interview.
They
You
did.
know, they had management, they had Martin St. Louis, they had some of the advisors, some of the development staff, scouting. You know, like it seemed like it wasn't okay. Well, you know, you're meeting with one or two people, and then the rest of the operation aren't really in the loop. And I think that's where that miscommunication or those different goals start to maybe stray from the original mission. So I thought that was one thing I really picked up on, that he mentioned, that there are that many people involved with interviewing him. So I think everybody now is on the same page. Everyone's starting from the same page, and you're not you're not dealing with kind of shifting goals midway through the season, right? And again, it's not easy to do. Like, everyone's different parts of the operation have different goals, right? Like, and that's what your head coach at the NHL level wants may be different from what your scouting people want, or what your general manager wants. And certainly if your general manager, not that this is the case in Montreal, but like if he's fighting for his job, he's going to have a different objective in terms of what he wants his AHL head coach to do than if he's secure like Hughes is. So yeah, I think that's the first part. And then to add to the second part is this is where I think having Laval and Montreal all under the same operation is really key, because you can all pull in the same direction in terms of that goal, which is ultimately, like you said, to win the Stanley Cup. Where I think problems can begin is when you have an independently owned AHL club where, quite frankly, they have a completely different mission, which is to sell tickets, to pay the bills, to keep their fans happy. And that can be a source of a lot of tension. We've seen some examples of that, obviously, throughout the years. Now there are teams that bridge that gap and do it quite well. Hershey, Washington is a perfect example of that, where they're able to both develop and win, but it's not easy to do, and it's it requires some compromise and some give on both sides' parts. From the NHL side, if you want to have your prospects play in a place like Hershey, where you're great facilities, great fan support, great really well run operation, then you have to give something back. You can't just send 10 prospects and say, okay, well, you know what, if you make the playoffs, great. If not, too bad, because fans aren't going to show up for that, right? Largely, fans don't care that much about development. It's been and they certainly don't want to pay. They don't want to have players develop for far away NHL club on their dollar, right? So now Laval, Montreal is a little different. Obviously, you're all kind of it's the same fan base. And they're all kind of what's good for the Rockets, good for the Habs, and vice versa. And so it's a different sort of dynamic altogether there. But it is absolutely one of the real challenges to have kind of those conflicting goals, and it's not always easy to bridge that gap.
Well, it's my goodness. I think it's been a long time since the three of us could sit down and have this long of a conversation about a new head coach for the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens that is filled with this much positivity and optimism. And I think that that's a really good thing. And that is no disrespect to the previous regimes, but I think, Patrick, what you said earlier was absolutely just great. The short answer is yes, this is the right hire. And I know I'm even more excited about it after hearing all of your input and feedback from it. And I think Laval fans should get excited about it. And I think Montreal Canadiens fans should be excited about it, because it means that all of this work and all of the pain that's been going, that everyone has been enduring, fans throughout the organization during this rebuild process, that maybe there's going to be the right pieces in place to really optimize all of the parts of the rebuild that Kent Hughes has been putting together, and Jeff Gorton's been putting together over the last few years. So thank you so much for coming on to the show today to really give us such a well-rounded scope of Pascal Vincent, newest head coach for the Laval Rocket. If you are not already following Patrick on Twitter, well, make sure you rectify that right now. It's at P. Williams AHL. He's a wealth of knowledge about everything related to the American Hockey League, including the Laval Rocket, of course. And we're just so pleased to be able to have him on the show. We're pleased to work with him as a contributor here at Rocket Sports. And Patrick, we thank you so much for taking some time out of your summer to come chat with us.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys. A great discussion and lots to learn there. Loved everything that the three of you had to talk about there. And a very special thanks to Patrick Williams, the AHL guru, who just seems to know everything and everything you need to know about the AHL, right?
Absolutely. And just to reiterate, this is a Canadiens hire for the AHL, their head coach of their AHL affiliate. But this is an NHL story as well because of the influx of talent. We talked about it with Patrick, and you know the names, whether it's Owen Beck or Logan Mailloux or David Reidenbacher or Adam Engstrom, and at some point we're going to have Demidov there as well, likely. But that's why this appointment is so key for the Montreal Canadiens, because we have the person who is going to be, there's going to be Adam Nicholas, of course, in his development role, but a much more than in the past of the development work is going to be done by the AHL head coach, and in this case, someone who has a ton of experience. So we're going to monitor it, and you know our AHL crew. We've got Amy leading it. We've got Chris G at Plasbell. We've got Patrick Williams. So we're going to have lots to talk about over this upcoming NHL and AHL season.
So as we work towards our Canadiens Connection question of the week, we'll give you some time to think about it and keep all this in mind when you answer. We'd like to ask each and every one of you, should Pascal Vincent prioritize player development or focus on making a push to win the Calder Cup in Laval? We'll give you a few moments to think about it as we head into our Have Your Say segment here on Canadiens Connection. And by the way, did you know this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp? And here's Amy to tell us a little bit about that.
You know, one of the things that we really value here at Rocket Sports about our community of listeners and viewers here at the Canadiens Connection and on places like our YouTube channel is how enthusiastic Habs fans are in this community. And that most of the time they really put out their opinions and even offer friendly debate in a polite and respectful way. It's something we really encourage here at Rocket Sports among our fans and followers and listeners and readers and viewers. But, you know, we all know what social media can be like on any platform, and there's always the outliers, right? There's always times where you feel like, well, maybe I don't want to share my opinion because someone else might say something not very nice in return, or maybe that sounds silly, or or maybe I want to share my thoughts and opinions, but gee, everyone else on this platform seems to know so much more about hockey than I do, and maybe I would sound silly if I said the things that are on my mind about this particular topic. Listen, we've all been there, and we always want this to be a welcoming place and a safe place for people to express their opinions and be heard and chat with others who just simply love the sport of hockey and the Montreal Canadiens as much as you do. But when you really do need to turn to someone to talk to, therapy can be something that will help you focus on the things you want instead of what others have, and you just want to live your best life, right? Some people might have their own preconceived notions about what therapy is or isn't, but it really should come down to being what works for you that is beneficial to just help you live your best life. And so I'm here today to tell you that if you are thinking about maybe dipping a toe and trying out therapy, why don't you give BetterHelp a try? It's a program that is completely done online. It's designed to be convenient, really flexible, suited to your schedule. And the coolest thing is you're just going to fill out like a brief questionnaire online, and they're going to match you, your personality, and your needs and wants with a licensed therapist. They're going to find the right therapist that will work for you. And you can schedule everything right there online, start talking, even kind of have like a little bit of a trial conversation to see if you feel comfortable with that particular therapist. If you don't, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So, hey, why don't you stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp? Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN.
Welcome back to episode 305 of the Canadiens Connection podcast, right here on Rocket Sports Radio. You can follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Plus, you can check out the website, canadiensconnection.fm. And feel free to text us anytime via the Rocket Sports text line, 5853-ROCKET. That's 5853-ROCKET. And just another thank you goes out to Amy Johnson, Patrick Williams, and you, Rick, for bringing us a wealth of knowledge in that second segment, talking about the brand new head coach of the Laval Rocket. And for those that are interested in keeping up with everything that we do and keeping up with the Montreal Canadiens, as we know, there's always something interesting going on right here in the middle of July, and we did get some breaking news this past week. Here's everything you need to know from Rocket Sports. We cover the Montreal Canadiens, and you can find all of that content at InsideTheCanadiens.com. All your Canadiens coverage in one place. You can find all sorts of multimedia content on our YouTube channel. Just make sure that you're subscribed to @AllHabs. You'll be able to find all sorts of great content, as we have been a source that you can trust for the past 15 years. Every single Monday, this podcast gets posted on YouTube. Last week's episode was entitled Expert Off-Ice Trading Advice for Montreal Canadiens Prospects. That one had our very own medical consultant, Dr. Stephen Morris. It was a great interview, lots of fun, lots of knowledge brought to the table in that one too. So if you haven't already, check that out on our YouTube channel. And sprinkled in throughout the summer, both the Rocket Hockey Report and the Habs Hockey Report will be posted periodically, hosted by Amy Johnson typically, and you can find that right there on our YouTube channel. The most recent edition was entitled 10 Montreal Canadiens Summer 2024 Headlines in 10 Minutes. So make sure you go on to our YouTube channel, hit subscribe if you like the content. Hit like. If you have a comment or a question, something you want to say to us, feel free to leave a comment. We love interacting with all of our viewers there. And if you want to be the first one to know about our content, tap that notification bell. That way, you're the first one to know, and you can head over to our YouTube channel right away. And while you're doing that, make sure that you are subscribed to the premier Rocket Sports Radio podcast on your favorite podcasting app, The Canadiens Connection. You can find us every single Saturday with brand new content. You can find our whole catalog and everything about The Canadiens Connection at canadiensconnection.fm. If you enjoy the show, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. And if you want to help us out a little bit more, feel free to share on X, Facebook, Reddit, any of your socials. You can share this podcast, and we thank you very much for that. We are your inside link to the Montreal Canadiens. And just a little bit of team news to get to here. Rick, we're looking for people to contact us.
Why don't you reach out to us if you have an interest in joining the Rocket Sports team, whatever your talent, and if you have a passion for the Montreal Canadiens and are willing to be a dedicated member of a group of people who want to put out good content about the Montreal Canadiens, reach out to us, reach out to me on social media, or send me an email. hello@rocketsportsmedia.com is our email address.
And now it's time to get to our Canadiens Connection question of the week, as we ask all of our listeners, should Pascal Vincent prioritize player development or focus on making a push to win the Calder Cup in Laval? We want to hear from you. We get tons of reaction throughout the week. I gave you the Rocket Sports text line earlier. I'll say it one more time for you, 5853-ROCKET. But we have an email address if you have a little bit more to say. Rick, what is that email address?
The email address is hello@rocketsportsmedia.com.
So like I said, we get tons of reaction throughout the week via text, tweets, emails, comments, and we got quite a reaction to last week's episode, Canadiens Connection, episode 304, as we asked, which Habs prospects do you believe will have the greatest chance of making the opening night roster this year? And Rick, what do people have to say about that?
Just going to read a couple of comments we received on our YouTube channel. This one coming from ZBlip22. He says, love your long form and deep analysis of Habs prospects. So interesting. I wouldn't mind the Habs having another bad year and picking a great prospect in next year's draft. We need to stock up on the most talent before they get out of the rebuild, period. If we are ever to bring home a cup, it'll be about 5 or 6 years. And he goes on to talk about players like Mayu, Reinbacher, and others, and Nick Suzuki being in fine form by then. They're top tier players, and that would align with their window of opportunities. So very, very logical, very well thought out, and thank you for that comment, ZBlip22. We move on to UBasic, at UBasic. And he says, I believe Montreal will do everything possible to bring Demidov over. And Owen Beck is probably going to make it. Heineman has to prove if it's his time. I hope that the Habs shuffle a bunch of guys in for a look throughout the season. So that would be, we heard Pascal Vincent in his media availability talking about, one of his jobs is going to be preparing the players, but also talking with the folks in Montreal, Marty St. Louis, and having a good relationship with him which player would be good to recall. UBasic goes on to say, I like your Monday show. It's very comprehensive for the rebuild period. Thanks. One last comment, this one coming from Center Heist 7948. He said, great job, interesting episode. On the question, do I think Hughes should be more aggressive in signing free agents on July 1st? No, I'm quite pleased that they stayed on course. Of course, that was our question from a couple episodes back. He thinks that the group, the executive crew, is right on track. He finishes by saying that he expects either one big trade or two smaller trades in the next little while. He says, keep up the great show, guys. I enjoy what you're doing. It's a much more mature, in-depth, thought-out podcast. Reality-wise, looking into the Habs, I commend you. So really nice. Love those kind words. And thank you. We often hear from Center Ice, and we really appreciate it.
So if you plan on reaching out to us, just leave us your first name and where you're from. That way we know who we're talking to, and we'd really appreciate that. We love all the messages that we get from everyone throughout the week as well. So coming up for your CH Weekly, you know what, Rick? I'm in the mood for some poutine, so I might head down to Poutine Fest tonight at Old Port. So looking forward to that. I believe we've got that on all weekend.
Nice.
And with that, I think it's a good time to take a wrap for today. So thank you all for listening. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Canadiens Connection podcast in the player or on any of your favorite podcasting apps. and you can share it on social media if you like what you heard. Enjoy the week. We'll be back here next Saturday, July the 27th, for another great episode. Thank you all for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.